sequel to my last video, A Conflict of Visions. Please watch that video before watching this one if you haven't seen it. Link in the description. I didn't plan on making a part 2 so soon, but I felt inspired, and I want to build on the concepts I touched on in my last video. So again, if you haven't seen my video, A Conflict of Visions, go ahead and check it out now before we move on. Okay, so one of the definitive differences between MRAs and MGTOW is that MRAs are fighting to reform the system, and MGTOW are just abandoning it. However, when you consider MGTOW content and how philosophical many MGTOW are, I think that another service that we can provide is to think past our present society and discuss possible solutions for the future. I don't believe that this society can be saved, but life will go on and humanity will endure. And without new ideas to replace the old failed ideas, those who rebuild society will fall back on what they know and are familiar with, and history will repeat itself. In my previous video, I discussed the difference between the constrained and unconstrained visions of human nature. Based on consistent historical evidence, I am going to dismiss any solution based on the unconstrained vision, and focus only on solutions that acknowledge and work within the limits of human nature. With that in mind, there are two possible solutions that I would like to analyze that will serve the function of constraining human nature into a productive society. First, let's analyze traditionalism. Now, I do have a bias against traditionalism, but let's give it a fair hearing. On the plus side, it works within the constrained vision, and it's worked throughout most of human history. It places legal rights and duties on both parties, which gives each an incentive to cooperate and further the welfare of the family unit, and by extension society, since the family is the smallest unit in the social hierarchy. However, in order for traditionalism to work, both men and women had duties and responsibilities, and feminism has allowed women to liberate themselves from their duties and responsibilities while using the force of government to ensure that men kept up their end of the bargain without reciprocity. Even MRAs admit this, but skirt around the solution to the problem. Razorblade Candy, in his video Why the Men's Rights Movement Will Not Succeed, said, and I quote, "You people blame the entire outcome on feminism, and you're mostly right. But here's the real bit of irony. It's the part of feminism the great bulk of you refuse to fight that is behind this. In order to stop half the marriages or around that number from ending in divorce, you are going to have to turn wives into the lawful property of their husbands. Make it so wives can't vote, can't own property, and aren't allowed to work without a husband's permission. May not lawfully file for divorce without husband's consent, i.e. only husbands can file for divorce. Make it so by law children are by default the default property of their father. If you are not prepared to implement that hardcore Islamic-style patriarchy, you are not fighting feminism in any meaningful way." End quote. Razorblade Candy is spot on. The reason traditionalism worked for so long is that men had explicit and legal authority over their wives. Once that is taken away, well, just look around and you'll see what happens when you take that away. However, do we really want to return to that? I contend that this system not only hurt men more than women, but created the very culture of gynocentrism we all oppose. I'm linking to a video from Karen Strawn called When Female Privilege Backfires, link in the description. Karen does an excellent job analyzing the Islamic-style patriarchy Razorblade Candy mentioned earlier, and shows how gynocentric it actually is, and how feminism exploits the inherent gynocentrism of traditionalism. Another video about this topic was produced just the other day by Neo Unplugged, which I'll also link to in the description, called Are MGTOW to Blame for Familiar Degradation? Neo shows that feminism's agenda of making men responsible for women's choices, such as so-called rape culture, where men rape women but women can't legally rape men, is nothing new. This culture, this societal belief that women aren't responsible, and that men are responsible for women's actions, was not a feminist invention, but a traditional one. In a traditionalist system, the man earns the money, and the woman stays home and raises the children. In a divorce, who do you expect to get the children, and who do you expect to pay child support in a traditionalist society? Obviously, the women get the children, and the man becomes the wage slave. Feminism didn't do that. Traditionalism did that. Feminism just made divorce easier. Traditionalism teaches that women are irresponsible children that need the guidance and leadership of a big, strong man. Is it any surprise that feminism has been so successful pushing a false image of men as rapists and domestic abusers? How could women be rapists and abusive when they're just irresponsible children after all? Now, I will admit that traditionalism worked largely until industrialization. When work meant working in the field all day doing back-breaking labor, and housework meant taking the laundry down to the wash basin by the creek and washing everything by hand, it was the best system for the time. However, as technology made factory and office work available to women, and also alleviated the burden of housework through labor-saving devices, women developed a discontent with traditionalism that did not originate from feminist or Marxist propaganda, but human nature. In Betty Friedan's 1963 book, The Feminine Mystique, Betty identifies the discontent with traditionalism felt by women in a modern society. She called it the, quote, problem that had no name, unquote. An article written in the American Journal of Public Health about the so-called problem that had no name summarized it thusly. Quote, it was a strange stirring, a sense of dissatisfaction, a yearning that women suffered in the middle of the 20th century of the United States. Each suburban wife struggled with it alone, as she made the beds, shopped for groceries, matched slipcover material, ate peanut butter sandwiches with her children, chauffeured Cub Scouts and brownies, lay beside her husband at night. She was afraid to ask even herself the silent question, is this all? Unquote. In my opinion, traditionalism cannot exist for long in a technologically advanced society, where physically demanding work is not the norm, and technology has made housework that used to take the entire day able to be completed in a couple hours at most. I believe that this is why you see feminism in first world countries, but not poor and technologically limited third world countries. In order for traditionalism to work, we have to give up our technology, and go back to working on farms rather than in air-conditioned offices. Consider the Amish communities. For those of you who don't live in America, they're a traditionalist, kind of isolationist community, mostly in Pennsylvania. They mostly work on farms and stay within their own communities. They ride horses instead of cars for transportation. They don't watch TV, listen to the radio, or own computers. The divorce rate in the Amish community is less than 1%. Now let's look at the divorce rate of other Christian denominations that chose to indulge in modern technology. Now the following survey, conducted by the Barna Research Group in 1999, used a disingenuous methodology in order to embarrass religion, which is unfortunate. Most divorce statistics use total marriages and measure the percentage of marriages that end in divorce, typically around 50% in the general population. But in this survey, people were simply asked if they had ever experienced at least one divorce in their life, meaning that a single person who's never been married would be counted among married people who have never been divorced. That's a little odd. And it absolutely affects the data since religious people are much more likely to be married than the general population. So I'm going to give the results of the survey for each of the denominations, but again, take this with a grain of salt because the survey did use manipulating methodology in order to reach a biased conclusion. But I think the point is made that even if the survey was conducted properly, the rates would be much higher than the 1% seen in the Amish community. So here are the percentages of people who have experienced a divorce by denomination. Jews, 30%. Baptists, 29%, mainline Protestants, 25%, Mormons, 24%, Catholics and Lutherans, 21%. My point is that traditionalism doesn't work in a modern society. It may have worked before, but now it doesn't. Unless you're willing to live like the Amish or the Taliban, divorce is going to be a thing, and it's always going to hurt men. Now, working within the constrained vision, there are essentially two ways to constrain human nature. One is through force or coercion. You use some force or coercion to keep people from making bad personal choices, usually through government. Traditionalism is an example of this principle. Husbands had legal authority over their wives, but there were legal consequences such as child support and alimony to dissuade men from walking out on their wives and abandoning their children. The other way to constrain human nature is to allow consequences to naturally express themselves. You don't force people to do the right thing, you simply allow them to do the wrong thing and let the natural negative consequences follow. For example, rather than pass a law to force motorcyclists to wear helmets, you let them make that call for themselves and let the gene pool filter itself out naturally. So we've examined traditionalism as a manifestation of the coercive application of the constrained vision. Now let's look at a possible solution that involves voluntary cooperation instead of coercion. Now what I'm about to detail is a possible solution that I've come up with that would, in my opinion, create a mutually beneficial relationship template for men and women to build a productive society. I'm not saying it's perfect, and I invite people to critique what I'm about to propose, suggest additions, changes, or an entirely new system altogether. This is just a starting point of what I hope will be a productive discussion within the MGTOW community, in order to create a viable alternative to simply retrying traditionalism once the current system fails and collapses. Gentlemen, and Diana Davison, I present my solution. So the working title I have for this solution is Roommates with Benefits. It's partially based on the Fuck Buddies model that John the Other details in his video MGTOW with Benefits, link in the description. Now Fuck Buddies are fine, but not especially conductive for raising children, which will be a necessity at some point to keep humanity chugging along. So here are the key features of my Roommates with Benefits system. 1. No marriage contracts. 2. Personal responsibility. And 3. Natural incentives. First, no marriage contracts. At all. Marriage is an outdated institution built to support a traditionalist system. Now, if you're religious, and you want to have a ceremony with a priest or whatever who declares you married before the sight of God and people throw rice at you, go nuts. Nobody's going to stop you, but there will be no marriage contracts. The state will have no part in marriage. Everyone will be treated the same in terms of rights, taxes, etc. There will be no legal benefits to marriage, and thus no reason to get married except as a religious ceremony if you choose to do so. Now I can hear the traditionalists howling and thumbing my video down as I speak, because marriage is the foundation of society. But you're misconstruing marriage with families. Marriage is just a legal construct. Families are the foundation of society. Marriage can still exist as an informal religious ceremony, but it will no longer carry the force of law. The man isn't legally obligated to take care of you anymore, ladies, so you had better bring more than your vagina to the table. You need to have your own career and income, and be responsible for half the household expenses just like a roommate. I don't care if the man makes more than you. You're paying half. That's how roommates work. If the man makes $60,000 a year and you make $40,000 a year, he's not paying 60% of the bills. He's paying 50% and you're paying 50%. That's called equality. Now, there are opportunities to barter. For example, maybe you can't afford 50% and the man chooses to pay more in exchange for domestic or sexual services. That's between you and him. The only property you're legally entitled to is what you bring into the relationship. There is no such thing as mutually owned property. Whoever paid for it owns it unless it was a gift. Private contracts can be drawn up and worked out individually if the couple chooses. Now this sounds like a terrible deal for women. How are women supposed to protect themselves against men who will walk out on them? Well, the obvious answer is to pick better men. I mean, come on ladies, not all men are like that. You just need to find the right one. Don't be so bitter. You just had a bad experience, and frankly, you may just have a small clitoris and don't know how to handle a real man. Seriously though, the first thing to recognize is that this arrangement doesn't harm women or benefit men, it's equal. I know that the status quo has been so overwhelmingly tilted towards women at the expense of men, but it's 2015, and women can earn just as much money as men, so deal with it. Secondly, you actually do need to consider your taste in men, ladies. If you reproduce with an irresponsible man, you did that to yourself. If you think that you can put on an act while dating, until you've trapped a man into marriage or with a baby, he's going to leave you when you drop the mask, and you did that to yourself. If you get pregnant from a man that expressly told you he doesn't want kids, don't expect him to pay for them. You have your reproductive rights, and so does he. So maybe consider character when selecting a mate, and have some character yourself, and you'll avoid most problems. Now, what if a young woman attempts to steal your man? There's nothing keeping him from leaving you. That's right, just like now when you leave us for another man and take half our shit with you. However, you have your own career, and you're contributing about 50% economically. You should be fine, even if he does leave you. But honestly, if you chose someone with character, and you had been a good partner to him, why would he want to leave? Yes, people do change, but if that's the case, he would have left you anyway. Also, under this system, young women won't be attracted to older men as much. The main reason women date and marry a sugar daddy is they want to get his money in a subsequent divorce. Women call this a starter husband. Without that financial incentive, these women will date men their own age because there's no money in it for them to date older men. And since women will be expected to contribute economically, they may not even care as much about a man's money in general. In the case of children, if the man affirmatively consented to having children, and the relationship ends, the default will be equal joint custody with neither parent paying child support to the other, in lieu of a private contract between both individuals. So in conclusion, this system basically lets people make bad decisions, and suffer the natural consequences as a result of those decisions. It expects women to work and contribute equally to men. It's true gender equality. Although this is essentially a rough draft, I'm very open to change. I believe that a system like this has the best chance in a modern industrial society to achieve good outcomes for men, women, and children. Unlike traditionalism, women aren't second-class citizens, and men aren't burdened with all the responsibility. Even if you're a woman that wants to be a stay-at-home mother and be taken care of by a man, or a man that wants a stay-at-home woman, you can still do that under this system. There just won't be a government to enforce it, and it will be up to both individuals to work that out between themselves, and create their own private contract if they choose to. Literally everyone wins in this scenario. The traditionalist men get their stay-at-home kitchen goddesses, and the women get their big, strong, manly providers. The feminists get what they say they want, gender equality. Actual no-shit gender equality. Alright, that's the end of this video. Obviously something like this is a fundamental shift in gender dynamics, and I've only briefly outlined some of the basic principles. Let me know what you think, and what you would add or change in the comment section. Please like, favorite, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.